There's something no one tells you. Every time you walk into a relationship, you're not just choosing a person, you're choosing their past, their wounds, their chaos, and sometimes even their legacy. Now imagine this, stepping into a love story where the leading role has already been played. The stage is set, the script is written, and you're not the main character. You're the man walking in after the movie started, expected to save the plot without changing the ending. That's what dating a single mother often feels like, and no one has the guts to say it out loud. The world today screams empathy. It demands that we don't judge, that we accept, that we love everyone equally. But attraction doesn't obey hashtags. It doesn't follow moral campaigns. Attraction is brutal. It's instinct. It's subconscious pattern recognition developed across millennia of survival. And deep down, whether we admit it or not, most men don't feel drawn to a throne that's already been occupied, especially when the crown was never offered to them. This isn't about hating single mothers. Far from it. Some of the most incredible women I've met carry that title. But this is about hierarchy. It's about instinct. And it's about understanding the game you're actually playing. Because if you step into a relationship where you're expected to be the provider, the protector, the emotional backbone, but never the center of her world, you're not in a partnership. You're in a substitution plan. We've romanticized sacrifice. We've glorified the man who steps up. But behind that fantasy lies a dangerous reality. Men entering dynamics where they give everything and gain almost nothing. Respect without authority, presence without power, sex without polarity. And worse, they carry a burden that another man left behind, often without recognition or gratitude. Yet, here's the contradiction. Some of these women are more feminine, loyal, and emotionally mature than the 20-something girls still chasing Instagram dopamine. Why? Because pain refines. Loss humbles. Motherhood, when embraced with grace, turns women into empresses. And that's where it gets complicated. When is it real connection, and when is it desperation disguised as virtue? We live in a world where every truth is called prejudice, and every preference is shamed into silence. But truth doesn't care how loud the mob is. It whispers in the quiet moments, when you're alone, questioning if the life you're building is truly yours, or if you've just inherited someone else's past. So let's cut through the noise. In the next few minutes, we're not going to talk about political correctness. We're going to talk about power, legacy, psychology, and what kind of relationship truly honors your value as a man. We've built a culture that confuses fairness with desire, and in doing so, we've created one of the most dangerous illusions in modern relationships, the belief that emotional equality guarantees romantic equality. It doesn't. You can believe all people deserve respect, and still recognize that attraction is selective, asymmetric, and often uncomfortable in its honesty. The moment a man is told he should feel the same about every potential partner, regardless of circumstance, he's being asked to override millions of years of instinct with a social slogan. And instinct doesn't negotiate. It waits, it watches, and when ignored, it sabotages quietly from the inside. Attraction has never been democratic. It has always been strategic. Long before dating apps and social narratives, men evaluated relationships through the lens of investment and return, legacy and stability. This isn't cruelty. It's evolutionary arithmetic. A relationship is not just emotional companionship. It is a merger of futures. When a man considers a woman with a child, he is unconsciously calculating layers of commitment that extend beyond romance. He is asking whether his energy will build his lineage or maintain the aftermath of another man's decisions. Society may shame him for thinking this way, but shame has never erased instinct. It only drives it underground, where it festers into resentment. What complicates this dynamic is the moral framing imposed by modern discourse. We are taught that hesitation equals prejudice, that preference equals discrimination. But preference is the architecture of attraction. Without it, desire collapses into obligation, and obligation is the fastest way to suffocate intimacy. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer argued that human relationships are governed less by conscious reason and more by blind will, a deep biological drive masquerading as choice. When a man forces himself into a relationship that contradicts his internal compass, he isn't evolving, he's fragmenting. He becomes divided between the role he performs and the truth he suppresses. Yet the illusion of emotional equality persists because it offers a seductive narrative that love alone can neutralize complexity. It promises redemption through sacrifice. The man who steps up is celebrated as noble, almost heroic. But heroism in relationships is often a disguise for imbalance. When one partner enters with a pre-existing emotional hierarchy where a child rightfully occupies the central axis, the romantic bond must orbit around that gravity. This is not inherently wrong, but it is structurally unequal. The man is not building a foundation from zero. He is integrating into a system with established priorities. If he misunderstands this architecture, he will interpret normal boundaries as rejection and necessary compromises as personal diminishment. Sociologist Zygmunt Bauman described modern love as liquid, constantly negotiating between freedom and security. A relationship with a single mother intensifies this tension. On one hand, there is the promise of depth, maturity, and emotional realism. On the other, there is the undeniable presence of limits that cannot be negotiated away. The illusion lies in pretending those limits don't exist. Men are encouraged to see themselves as emotionally interchangeable, as if their role can simply be inserted into an existing framework without friction. But human bonds are not modular components, they are ecosystems. Every new participant alters the balance. Here is the contradiction that unsettles many. Empathy and attraction are not enemies, but they are not synonyms either. A man can deeply respect a single mother's resilience and still question whether the structure of that relationship aligns with his long-term vision. Respect is ethical, attraction is existential. Conflating the two creates guilt where there should be clarity, and guilt is a terrible architect for a future. Relationships built on guilt tend to demand constant proof of virtue, turning affection into performance. What remains unspoken in most discussions is the psychological cost of ignoring asymmetry. When a man feels he must compete with a past he cannot rewrite, he may overcompensate through excessive provision or emotional compliance. This creates a silent contract. He gives more to justify his presence. Over time, this imbalance erodes polarity, the dynamic tension that sustains romantic energy. Without polarity, relationships become administrative partnerships. Functional, perhaps. Stable, even, but drained of the magnetism that initially drew two people together. And yet, dismissing all relationships with single mothers as doomed would be intellectually lazy. Reality is more nuanced. Some men find profound fulfillment in these partnerships precisely because they enter with lucid expectations. They understand the terrain. They accept the hierarchy not as a personal slight, but as a contextual truth. In doing so, they transform potential resentment into chosen responsibility. The key distinction is agency. A man who chooses with awareness stands on solid ground. A man who chooses to conform to social pressure builds on sand. This is where the illusion begins to crack. Emotional equality does not mean identical circumstances. It means honest negotiation with reality. When society pressures men to ignore structural differences in the name of compassion, it inadvertently breeds relationships founded on denial. Denial is fragile. It cannot withstand the daily friction of lived experience. Only truth can. And truth, in this context, is not a verdict against single mothers, nor a manifesto for avoidance. It is an invitation to examine desire without censorship. To ask whether the life you are constructing aligns with the instincts you carry. Because suppressed instinct does not disappear. It reemerges as doubt, distance, and quiet dissatisfaction. A relationship that begins with unspoken compromise often ends with spoken regret. As we move forward, the conversation must shift from abstract ideals to tangible consequences. The illusion of equality is only the surface layer. Beneath it lies a more intricate question. Not about fairness, but about cost. Every relationship demands payment in time, energy, and identity. And when the structure is already weighted, that cost multiplies in ways most men fail to anticipate. Understanding that hidden ledger is the next step. Because before you can decide whether a path is worth walking, you must see clearly what it asks you to carry. There's a silence that lives in the heart of every man who's ever stepped into a relationship where the child came before he did. It's not resentment. It's not jealousy. It's something more primal. The quiet recognition that he is building on ground already claimed, and the deeper he goes, the more that silence echoes. This was never built for you. At first, it's invisible. The affection feels real. The chemistry is there. The woman seems grateful, maybe even amazed by the fact that you're different, that you don't run, that you stay. But slowly, reality exposes what fantasy concealed. You realize that her heart is not a blank canvas. It's a palimpsest, overwritten by layers of emotion, history, and responsibility. And the child? The child is not a footnote. He is the headline. You are the new chapter, yes, but never the main story. This is not about blaming women. It's not about vilifying motherhood. It's about understanding the hierarchy of emotional gravity that shapes every relationship, even when we pretend it doesn't. A man entering this dynamic unconsciously negotiates for space, not just physical space, but emotional real estate. And what he finds more often than not is that the prime property is already occupied. He may be welcomed, but he is not foundational. He is auxiliary. Now, ask yourself, what does that do to a man's instinct for leadership? What does it do to his sense of masculine polarity when the structure into which he steps demands presence without control, provision without direction, love without centrality? In ancient systems of power, authority followed responsibility. A king who protected his kingdom ruled it. A patriarch who provided for his household led it. But in modern romantic dynamics, especially those involving single mothers, that alignment is often fractured. The man is expected to provide, emotionally and sometimes financially, but with no real authority. He can pay, he can protect, but he cannot decide. He is asked to love a child who may never see him as more than mom's boyfriend, and to accept that his emotional stake does not come with leadership rights. This dynamic breeds a unique kind of psychological erosion. It doesn't break you quickly. It breaks you slowly. Through small daily moments of deferral. You yield to schedules you didn't create. You adjust your tone because he's sleeping. You delay intimacy because he needs attention. None of these moments are wrong in isolation, but their cumulative effect is the quiet disintegration of masculine centrality. Over time, you stop feeling like a partner. You start feeling like a placeholder. And then there's the ghost of the man who came before you. He might be gone physically, but emotionally, legally, or logistically, he is still there. Maybe she co-parents with him. Maybe she resents him. Maybe she avoids talking about him. But he exists, not just as a memory, but as an axis around which part of her life still spins. And you're orbiting both of them, trying to define your place in a constellation that was never designed for you. This is where many men lie to themselves. They convince themselves that love will fix the imbalance, that their kindness will buy authority, that by being better than the last guy, they'll be rewarded with the full throne. But relationships aren't meritocracies. They're systems of psychology and structure. And no amount of effort can override a misaligned architecture. You can love deeply and still be marginalized subtly. Not because she's malicious, but because the system is already set. And you're the one trying to retrofit your importance into a frame already filled. You show up to school events, you fix broken cabinets, you carry groceries. But in her heart, you're still the option. Not because she doesn't care, but because you entered a world already defined by a prior choice. Her child was born from another man's legacy, and no matter how well you perform, you will never fully rewrite that origin story. Worse, in conflict, the structure reveals its deepest truth. When arguments arise, when tension builds, you quickly discover the weight you truly carry. You're reminded, subtly or explicitly, that you're not the father, that the decisions aren't yours, that if things fall apart, she will retreat into her role as mother first, woman second. You again are third, if you're even on the list. This isn't just emotional, it's existential. Masculine identity is tied to direction, leadership, and the feeling of being the axis around which a relationship rotates. When that role is denied or diluted, men either withdraw or overcompensate. Withdrawal leads to resentment, apathy, and emotional shutdown. Overcompensation leads to desperation, trying to prove value through gifts, overgiving, or submissiveness. Both paths end in internal collapse. And yet society applauds this suffering. It dresses it up as maturity. It tells men to man up, to accept the package deal to prove they're real men. But this is not maturity. It's martyrdom in disguise. True maturity isn't self-erasure. It's self-awareness. It's knowing the difference between sacrifice and surrender. One empowers, the other empties. There's another layer we rarely discuss, the effect on the child. Children are intuitive. They sense power imbalances, emotional hesitation, and inconsistencies in attachment. When a man enters a home unsure of his role, the child picks up on that ambiguity. Some respond by clinging, others by resisting. But rarely do they integrate seamlessly. And over time, the man realizes that no matter how much he invests, he may still be emotionally bankrupt in that child's eyes. He was never there when the bond was born. He arrived later. And in relationships, timing is territory. Now, let's talk about what this does to intimacy. Many men report a slow erosion of sexual polarity in relationships where their role is undefined. They feel more like caretakers than partners. The sexual energy fades, not because attraction died, but because structure devoured it. Polarity needs contrast, masculine presence, feminine openness. But when the man becomes emotionally neutered by the system, always available, never dominant, desire suffocates. And so we arrive at the cruelest contradiction of all. The very thing that drew him in, her strength, her resilience, her independence as a mother, becomes the very thing that prevents him from fully leading the relationship. He loves her strength, but he can't penetrate her structure. He respects her motherhood, but he drowns in the architecture it creates. And unless this is spoken, named, and negotiated, the relationship will decay under the weight of its own unspoken truths. But here's the paradox. Some men do thrive in these relationships. The difference? They enter with clear eyes, hard truths, and firm boundaries. They don't hope for centrality. They negotiate it. They don't assume leadership. They earn it through structure, not supplication. These men don't expect to be number one emotionally. They build a new space where they can lead without competing with the past. It's rare, it's delicate, but it's possible. Still, most men don't enter this terrain with strategy. They enter with fantasy. And fantasy in a misaligned structure becomes self-betrayal. Not immediately, but eventually. One day you wake up and realize you've spent years proving yourself to a system that was never designed to honor you. So before you walk into that home, before you tie your future to hers, pause. Ask yourself the question most men are too afraid to ask. If the system collapses, what am I allowed to keep? The answer to that question defines whether you're building a legacy or renting a role. And legacy, as we'll see next, requires more than love. It demands discernment. Because while most relationships ask for your time and affection, some ask for your entire identity. And if you give that away too cheaply, the cost will be paid in silence, in sacrifice, and in the slow disappearance of the man you once were. Not all mothers are created equal, and not all single mothers are cautionary tales. In fact, some are queens forged in fire, sharpened not by tragedy, but by what they did with it. These are not victims of circumstance. They are architects of their rebirth. And for the man who understands the rare mechanics of power and femininity, these women aren't liabilities, they're blueprints for empires. But let's be clear, this is not about saving anyone. The man who enters a relationship hoping to rescue a woman from her past is still playing out his own fantasy, not seeing her reality. And reality is this: the only single mother worth a serious relationship is the one who has made peace with her past, silenced its noise, and restructured her future with clarity, not chaos. What separates her from the rest is not just her softness, it's her structure. She doesn't ask a man to complete her journey. She invites him into a story she's already reclaimed. Her child doesn't serve as bait for emotional validation. Her home is not a battlefield of unresolved trauma. She doesn't weaponize her wounds to manipulate guilt. Instead, she wears them as proof of growth, not entitlement. There's a dangerous myth that says every single mom is doing her best. But effort is not the same as alignment. Some women move forward while still dragging the ghosts of old relationships into every new one. Others use motherhood as a shield, a permanent excuse to avoid vulnerability or accountability. But the magnetic mother? She's different. Not because of her child, but because of her self-awareness. She's made the internal shift most people avoid, from emotional reaction to intentional reconstruction. She knows she cannot offer the same blank slate romance a single woman might. So instead, she offers something even rarer: honesty, maturity, and emotional architecture. For a man of vision, That kind of foundation is a gift. If she passes through 3 filters, he must never bypass. Filter 1, legacy. A woman's relationship with legacy defines her relationship with men. The magnetic mother respects the idea of continuity. She doesn't treat you as a repairman for the ruins of her past, but as a builder of something new. She speaks of the future more than she reminisces on the past. Her identity is not tethered to being abandoned or wronged. She's processed that pain, not plastered over it. If she can't envision a legacy with you without comparing it to her ex, she hasn't graduated. She's recycling. And recycled love is infertile soil for masculine ambition. Filter 2. Loyalty. Loyalty is not just about fidelity. It's about emotional exclusivity. The magnetic mother closes energetic loops. She has cut ties, spiritually and emotionally, with the man who fathered her child. She doesn't bring up his name at the dinner table, doesn't consult him emotionally when things get hard, and doesn't triangulate conflicts through the child. Her loyalty is directional. It flows forward, not sideways. If she still uses the phrase, "He'll always be in my life," you're not with a woman, you're with a courtroom. And no man builds freedom on trial. Filter 3, leadership. You are the man, not the assistant, not the backup, not the emotional sponsor. A real woman knows the difference. The magnetic mother does not emasculate your presence by comparing you to her ex or undermining your decisions. She wants to be led, not dominated but guided. She values structure because she's tired of chaos. She welcomes your standards because hers have already been forged. You don't need to beg for a role in her life. She creates one for you because she understands that the masculine thrives not in permission, but in purpose. Most men never meet a woman like this because they've never refined their discernment. They move through life collecting experiences, not filtering realities. They enter relationships blind, hoping love will compensate for poor structure. But love without discernment is like a castle built in the sea. It looks beautiful until the tide rises.